2 words. That's all it took to ruin the quiet you thought you'd earned. Don't forget. That's what the text said. The one sitting in your phone 3 hours after a number changed your life. A number you hadn't said out loud to a single person on earth. Not your mother. Not your father, who at that exact moment was lying on a flattened piece of cardboard underneath your car, draining the oil with his own hands because he refused to pay a shop $40 for what he called a $10 job. The only people who knew the real number were 2 lawyers, a banker, and you. None of them know your brother's name. So when his text landed in the cup holder of your car, you didn't reach for it right away. You let it sit there, buzzing once, then again. Rosa was standing by the garage door with a dish towel still in her hand, and she saw your face before she saw the phone. "What?" she said. Not a question, really. More like she already knew the answer would be bad. "You read the text twice, heard you sold. We should talk." "Who told him?" Rosa asked. And you didn't have an answer because there wasn't one that made sense. You hadn't posted anything. The deal had closed behind closed doors, lawyers, and silence. The kind of quiet you'd planned for weeks. And somehow your brother already knew, before your own mother did, before you'd even let yourself believe it was real. You started typing back. "Who told you?" Then you deleted it because some part of you already understood the thing you'd spent in the rest of your life unable to unlearn. Money is the one secret that tells itself. It doesn't need you to say a word. You put the phone face down on the seat. Your father grunted from under the car and asked if there was a funnel in the garage. Not did it close. Not are we rich now. Just funnel. And for about 4 minutes, standing there holding a plastic funnel for a man who had no idea his son had just become a millionaire, everything was still ordinary. Rosa caught your eye through the garage doorway and didn't say anything either. She didn't have to. Then the phone buzzed again and again. 3 texts now, all from your brother, the last one just 2 words. Don't forget. You didn't know yet what those 2 words would cost you. What you remembered instead, standing in that garage, was a night 14 years earlier, back when you were broke enough to hear your own refrigerator humming, because there was nothing inside it loud enough to drown it out. Your brother had almost nothing himself that winter, and he still drove 40 minutes through the cold to press 2 folded 20s into your hand. He wouldn't take it back. "Pay me when you're a millionaire." He'd laughed. Like it was a joke neither of you actually believed. You weren't laughing now. Word moves through a family the way water finds a crack, and your mother has never once in her life been able to hold a secret longer than a weekend. By Saturday, everyone knew, and a family does the only thing a family knows how to do with news that big. They throw a cookout. It was loud, and it was warm, and it was exactly the kind of afternoon you would have loved a year ago. Folding tables in the yard. Your uncle burning the burgers on purpose because that's just who he is. Kids running through a sprinkler, shrieking every time the water hit them. Rosa moved through it easily, the way she always does, hugging your aunt, laughing at something your cousin said, and you watched the whole thing from a few feet outside it, like you were watching your own life through a window. Your brother found you with a beer in one hand and a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Careful around this guy," he said loud enough for the table to hear. "He'll charge you for the ride home now." Everyone laughed. You laughed too. And that's the part nobody warns you about. How something can feel exactly like love and still not be love at all. It's got the shape of it, the teasing, the whole table laughing at the kid who made good. For 1 second, you let yourself believe nothing had changed. Then your cousin, the one you barely talked to most years, slid in next to you, half joking and fully serious, and asked when you'd start hiring, because you'd think of family first, right? And he laughed, and you laughed, and someone else laughed too, because a joke is just how people ask for something they're too afraid to ask for out loud. You started hearing it everywhere after that. Under every laugh, a small open hand, waiting. You looked across the yard for your brother's grin, the one that usually anchors you at these things, and it wasn't there anymore. He was watching you laugh the joke off, and something moved across his face, fast, gone in an instant. Disappointment. He hadn't wanted it to be a joke. He'd wanted it to land. Later that night, lying in bed, Rosa said the thing you'd been avoiding all day. Something's off with your brother. I can't tell you what yet, but something's off. She was right, of course. You just didn't know how right for another few weeks. You weren't even looking for it. That's what made it worse. You were at the dealership for something boring, a recall notice, 40 minutes you'd never get back when you saw him through the glass. Your brother, out on the lot, walking a salesman down a row of SUVs the way a man walks when he wants to be seen walking. He hadn't noticed you yet, so you watched and you did the math you wished you didn't know how to do. You knew his paycheck, you knew his rent, you knew, almost to the dollar, what he could actually carry. And the truck he was circling wasn't something he could carry. It was something that would carry him for about 4 months before it started dragging him under. Then he spotted you, and he didn't look caught. He looked delighted. He waved you over loud enough for the salesman to hear. Tell me this isn't clean, he said, slapping the hood like he already owned it. And you understood, standing there, that this had never been about the truck. A week earlier, he'd seen your car. This was his answer. You told Rosa about it that night over dinner. The whole thing, the price he said out loud just so he could check your face for a reaction. She listened without interrupting, the way she does, and when you finished, she set her fork down and said it plainly. People don't resent your success. They resent what it says about their own choices. You looked at her. He's not buying a truck, she said. He's buying back the inches he thinks he lost the day your wire cleared. You would have traded every dollar in that account to get back the brother who once drove 40 minutes in the cold to hand you his last 220s. That one gave you something when he had nothing. This one was spending money he didn't have, so the gap between you wouldn't show. By the time you got home from the dealership, it wasn't just him anymore. There was an aunt calling about a quick opportunity, just needed a little to get moving. You'd practically be doing her a favor, and your mother started a sentence she'd never used on you before. Well, now that you can afford it, not a question, a reclassification. You used to be her son. Now you were a resource that happened to wear her son's face, and you hadn't spent a single dollar yet. Then your brother called, not a text this time, an actual call, and there was a softness in his voice you hadn't heard in months. The old softness, the one from before all of this. He wanted you to come by, wanted to run something past you. And against everything you just watched at that dealership, it worked. You wanted it to be the old him so badly that you said yes before you'd even hung up the phone. Rosa caught you grabbing your keys. Be careful what you say yes to tonight, she said, and you nodded like you'd heard her, even though you hadn't really. You sat at his kitchen table, the same table you'd sat at 100 times before. There was coffee. He was nervous in a way that almost made you trust it because the man at the dealership hadn't been nervous about anything. Then he said the number, $40,000. And somewhere under that table, 14 years quietly rearranged themselves. $40 then. 40,000 now. Pay me when you're a millionaire. He wasn't asking for a loan. In his mind, he was collecting one. It can't lose, he told you, laying out a plan that was 80% confidence and 20% detail. This was the moment you were supposed to say no. For a second, you almost did. You thought about the lot, the slapped hood, the price he'd said just to watch your face. A quiet voice in you said he doesn't want help. He wants to be even, and you can't buy a man even. You knew that voice was right. You said yes anyway, not to the deal, to the face across the table, to the small chance that the money might buy back the brother who once drove through the cold for you. It's only money, you told yourself. You of all people could afford to be wrong about $40,000. For a while, it actually worked. This is the part nobody warns you about, because it's the part that does the real damage. 2 weeks in, he showed up at your house on a Sunday morning, no warning. 2 coffees in hand and a ladder strapped to that ridiculous truck. He said he'd noticed your gutters sagging the last time he drove by, and he just climbed up and fixed them himself. 3 hours. Wouldn't take a dime for it. Halfway up the ladder, he looked down at you and grinned. The real grin, the 14 years ago grin, and said, I'm paying back every dollar. You know that, right? And you believed him. Standing in your own yard holding a coffee he'd bought, you believed him completely. You thought you'd been wrong about all of it. The dealership, the aunt, the open hands everywhere. You thought money hadn't broken anything. You thought it had been tested and it had held. You let your guard all the way down. Even Rosa, watching from the porch, allowed herself a small smile that morning. That's exactly when it went. The call came the following Sunday. The deal that couldn't lose had lost everything. There was no apology, no thank you for the 40,000 that had just evaporated. There was something in his voice you'd never heard from him before. He was asking for more, except he wasn't really asking. He was explaining why you were going to give it. The first 40 was just to get in, he said. Pulling out now wastes it. You can't stop halfway. You wouldn't even feel another 30. He said it like your money was a limb that had gone numb. You sat there holding the phone, and you weren't thinking about the 30,000. You were thinking about the ladder, the gutters, the grin, and how he must have already known about this failing deal that Sunday morning. The coffee, the gutters, all of it. The gesture hadn't been kindness. It had been a deposit. That's the part nobody tells you about generosity. The moment you give it, it stops being a gift and becomes the baseline. So you told him no, your first real no. It came out softer than you meant it to, almost like an apology. He went quiet, said okay, said I get it, hung up. 2 days of nothing. You started to think the no had actually held. Then your mother called, and she opened with a sentence that told you exactly who'd gotten to her first. Why are you doing this to your brother? You didn't even know how to answer because the question had already decided you were guilty. You started explaining the 40,000, the failed deal, the second ask, and you heard your mother go quiet on the other end. Not listening, quiet, waiting quiet. He's struggling, she finally said, and you have so much now. There it is, so much now, as if the number had changed what you owed her. I'll think about it, you said. You wouldn't, but you said it anyway. That night, you told Rosa everything, and she didn't sugarcoat it. He's not fighting you, she said. He's recruiting. And she was right. He hadn't argued with your no. He hadn't needed to. He'd just walked down a hallway to a room you couldn't enter and let your mother carry the message back for him. After that, it never came as a confrontation. That's the part nobody tells you. It came as a text left on read for the first time in your life. It came as an uncle who used to call you champ, now calling you moneybags with a laugh that had a small hook buried in it. None of it was big enough to point at. If you'd brought up any single piece of it, you'd have sounded paranoid, rich and paranoid. So you said nothing, and you just felt the temperature of every room drop half a degree the second you walked in. In the middle of all of it, your father, who still hadn't said one word about the money, showed up unannounced that same week, the way he sometimes does for no reason at all. He didn't need anything fixed. He didn't bring anything up. He just sat at your kitchen table for an hour, drank his coffee, told you a long, pointless story about a guy he used to work with, laughed at his own ending. Then he rinsed his cup, set it in the rack, and went home. No opportunity. No now that you can afford it. He'd driven over just to sit with you. You didn't think much of it at the time. You would later. Thanksgiving was 11 days away, and you almost didn't go. You sat in your driveway first, the same driveway where all of this had started, and thought about turning the car around. You went in anyway, partly because not going would have been its own kind of confession, and partly because some part of you still believed a table full of food could hold a family together by force. For about an hour, it almost did. Everyone was careful. The conversation stayed on safe ground. The food, the game, somebody's kid getting braces. Your brother sat across the table instead of next to you, which someone had clearly arranged without saying so out loud. He was quieter than you'd ever seen him at a table like this, a few drinks in, and you could see him deciding something while you kept talking to your aunt about nothing at all, just so you wouldn't have to watch him decide it. Then it happened, small and sudden the way these things usually do. Your father asked you plainly, across the table, how the new place was coming along. The only person all night who'd asked you a normal question, like you were just a normal person. And before you could answer, your brother set down his fork. Must be nice, he said. Not loud. That's the part that made it worse. He said it almost gently. The table didn't go silent right away. A couple of people kept talking for a second, then trailed off when they felt it. Your mother said his name once, soft, half warning, half plea. He wasn't looking at his plate anymore. He was looking at you, and there was no grin left, no joke, none of the old armor, just something tired and certain underneath all of it. We lost you the day that money came in, he said. You didn't get rich. You just stopped being one of us. The worst part, the part that made it land instead of bounce, was that he wasn't shouting. He believed it. He said it the way you say something you've been carrying for months. Quietly, almost sadly, like he was grieving you at your own dinner table. Nobody defended you. Not because they agreed with him, but because silence is easier than picking a side out loud. And silence, you were learning, is its own kind of answer. You looked at your mother. She was looking at her plate. You looked for your father, and your father was the only one looking back at you. Rosa's hand found yours under the table, and she didn't say a word either, because some things don't need a word, they just need a hand. For 1 second, before you could stop it, a thought you were ashamed of moved through you. Maybe he's right. Maybe the money did something to you that you can't see from the inside. It passed as fast as it came, but it left a mark because the cruelest part of an unfair accusation is the half second you spend wondering if it's true. You set your napkin down, said something quiet about needing to head out, and nobody fought you on it. That was the loneliest part of the entire night. How easy you were to let leave. People will forgive you for having money. They will never forgive you for having a limit. You were almost to your car when you heard a door open behind you, footsteps on the gravel, not fast, not your brother's. You already knew whose they were before you turned around. Your father didn't say anything about what had just happened inside. He just stood with you in the cold for a second, looked at your car and said, "Drive safe. Call your mother in a few days." Then he patted the roof twice, the way he's done since you were 16 years old, and went back inside to a table that had just quietly broken in half. That was the last ordinary conversation you'd have with him. The call came 3 weeks later on a Wednesday, which is how you'll always remember it. Not even a weekend. The day had no reason to be the day. Your mother's voice on the phone, and you couldn't understand the words at first, only the shape of them. Hospital. Now. Come now. You don't remember the drive. You remember the hallway, the specific quiet of a hospital at night, the way the floor shines under fluorescent light, how loud your own shoes sounded. You remember your brother already there, standing against the wall, and how for the first time in over a year, there was nothing between you. No money, no truck, no scorekeeping. Just two sons standing in a hallway. He looked at you, and his face did something it hadn't done in months. It just crumpled. You put a hand on his shoulder, and he let you. Neither of you said a single word about any of it, because the whole war was suddenly gone, gone in an instant, because it had never been big enough to survive a hallway like that one. Your father was awake, smaller than you'd ever seen him, but awake. The worst of the scare had passed. He wanted the room cleared for a few minutes. He wanted you. You sat in the chair beside the bed, and you didn't know what to say, so you said the dumb, true thing. That he'd scared you. He smiled a little at that. And then, in the plain voice of a man too tired to dress anything up, he told you something he had never told another living soul. The 40 acres upstate, your grandfather's land, the only thing your father had ever owned that meant anything to him, the place he'd always said he wanted to be buried on, he'd sold it the spring before you started your business. You never knew. You'd always believed the money that got you off the ground had been his savings, some cushion he'd quietly kept aside. It was the land. It had always been the land. He sold his own father's ground out from under his own feet quietly and folded the money into the start of you and never said a word. Not when the business nearly died. Not when it turned around. Not the Tuesday the wire cleared and you became the first millionaire in the family, standing on soil he'd given up just so you could stand anywhere at all. You sat there, and the entire last year turned over in your hands and became something else completely. You'd built it. Every brutal hour of those 11 years was yours, and no one could take that from you. But you'd never built it alone. The one person who never asked you for a single dollar was the one who had quietly made the first dollar possible and then erased his own fingerprints from it so completely that you'd spent an entire year believing you'd done it by yourself, while your brother, who once gave you $40, never once let you forget it. You asked him the only thing you could get out. Why keep it a secret? Why let you believe it was all yours? And he told you about his own brother, your uncle, a name you barely remembered from when you were small, a man who'd stopped coming around before you were old enough to ask why. Money, your father said. He'd lent his brother money once, a long time ago. And after that, the money was always in the room with them, at every holiday, every phone call, sitting at the table like a third person, until one day his brother just stopped coming altogether. It's easier to lose a brother, he said, than to sit across from a debt for the rest of your life. I wasn't going to do that to you. I wasn't going to put a number between us. So I made sure there wasn't one to find. The ones who never ask, he told you, are the only ones who were never keeping score. He was tired then. He closed his eyes and told you to send your brother in. You're both still mine, he said. That was the whole sermon. The only thing he ever said about the war that had nearly torn his family apart. He didn't take a side. He refused to let there be one. He came home a few days later, slower but okay, and nothing actually got fixed. Not really. Your brother never paid back the 40,000. Your mother never apologized for that phone call. The family never reset to who it was before the wire cleared, because families don't reset. They just learn the new shape of themselves and keep going. But something in you had gone quiet. The resentment you'd been carrying around without even realizing how heavy it had gotten, it was just gone. Not because anyone had earned it back, because you finally knew which kind of person each of them was, and you'd stopped expecting any of them to be a different kind. Rosa said it best, weeks later, lying beside you one night when you couldn't sleep. The money didn't change your family, she said. It just turned the lights on and showed you who'd been loving you in the dark the whole time. It's a Saturday now, a few months after all of it. Your father's car is making a sound he doesn't like, and he's about to drive it to the shop, and you tell him no, you've got it. So you lie down on a flattened cardboard box in your own driveway, and you slide underneath your father's car, and you change his oil yourself. It's a $10 job. The shop would have charged him 40. That was never really the reason, and you know that now. You stay under there longer than the job actually takes, flat on your back in the quiet, your hands doing the exact thing his hands did for you your whole life. And you finally understand what he was saying all those years, with nothing but a wrench and a toolbox and a gate hinge that never used to drag. He was never just fixing the car. He was saying, I love you in the only language he had, the one that never asks for anything back, the one that never keeps score, the one you couldn't hear until the year everyone else around you got loud. You tighten the drain plug, you slide back out into the light. Your father's standing on the porch watching you, not saying anything. You don't say anything either. If you've got someone in your life who's never asked you for a thing, this might be your sign to call them today. And if this story hits somewhere, tell me in the comments which line stuck with you. We lost you the day the money came in, or I wasn't going to put a number between us. Because I read every single one. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one, every week, right here.